Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. This is not organic, says Joe Rogan. His attorney in the news. Who? Don Lemon. Why? Got arrested. Trump names Kevin Warsh to lead the Federal Reserve. Shame. I thought he was going to get rid of the Federal Reserve. Stunning Epstein twist. We'll tell you about that. We're also going to follow George Washington's counsel. How's that? Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. I'm Sam Bushman, and I've got Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com with me. Check out his incredible To Preserve the Nation series. Also, his Q&As on the Constitution every Thursday evening, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Available for you. Get your ticket at freedomsrisingsun.com and join. And we'll get to the Q&As coming up here, weekly Q&As, etc., in seconds. Don Lemon got arrested in Los Angeles last night or this morning over the Minnesota church protests. I'm wondering why it took so long. Don Lemon, I guess, how do you say it? He says he was there for journalistic purposes, folks, and nothing more. And the judge and the folks who arrested him said, no, we think there's a little more to it than that. All right. Dr. Bradley, welcome to the broadcast. And what do you think of the Don Lemon arrest, sir?
I don't know. Let's see it play out. I just, it's not over until, somebody sings, I guess. But I guess it, things, what shall we say? The wheels of justice move slowly, but let's see if we can chase it to the end and get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, the problem is it's hard to tell. Did he just go into the church peacefully? Did he advocate? Did he cause problems? What did he do? What is it, trespassing? You got to really kind of understand what he's being arrested for. My problem with this whole thing is some of these leaders have really led these actions. And to me, disrupting a church service on private property, all those people that went there, disturbing the peace, you could say, there was all kinds of intent to disrupt and cause problems. Were they allowed to be there on private property and do what they did? I mean, there's a lot of issues surrounding this, Doctor. I think we need due process for everyone, but what we really want to see is transparency here. Transparency about, who really did what, when, how, et cetera. I just know this. What if they came into one of our chapels and did the same thing? How would that go?
Well, I probably be less disruptive than what they had. I mean, there were people at least opposing them. I don't know. I think it's the record should show what happened and how, and I think we need to let it play out. But I think that it's a lot of people are taking license with things that they claim they can do and don't give consideration to other people. If it's there and disruptive and destructive and all that kind of stuff, let's let them pursue in the court case and let's get her done.
That's exactly why I'm calling for, hey, if this arrest was justified, then we need to see what the probable cause was. We need to have due process for Don Lemon. We need to have transparency in the courts so the American people understand. Part of the problem with our society today is in the past, you could get arrested or accused or whatever, and it wasn't really too big of a deal. But now you get a household name in the negative if you're not very careful. So Don Lemon, depending on how this court case comes out, but I mean, you might even have a lawsuit saying, hey, you guys, abused me, ruined my public name, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's an issue there, too, where people don't get fairness in the courts. And I'm not a friend of Don. I don't think he should have been at that church. I don't think he should have been disruptive. I think it's morally apprehensible or wrong. That's not how you work for a redress of grievance. At the same time, I'll say, if he violated the law. So what we need is transparency to get clarity here, Doctor. And what we need is due process for everyone.
Well, that's what the founding fathers had in mind when they put together our judicial system. And And as I've said many times, not only in your program, but at every other opportunity that comes up, that the American founding fathers biased the judicial system in favor of the accused. And the reason was that it's a pretty, as you say, you can become known for good or evil, if you will. And if in fact it's unjustified that you're being accused, it shouldn't happen. So they put together things like grand juries, and they put together your petit jury, where your peers would see you and your case and be able to judge that thing. And that's why there's jury nullification. And it was always part of the American system. Well, it was part of the Old English system, where the jury could say, you know what, the law says this, and you did that, but because of circumstances, we're judging you not guilty. And so there was a whole bunch of protections that the American founding fathers put into this. And I think a lot of times we were judge, jury, and hangman in the public square before anybody's had their say. It's kind of like,
and that's my problem. That's why I say we got to have due process, transparency, and we've got to educate, in my opinion, the public as to what is actually happening here, right? Because a lot of Americans are just like, get him. He's evil. He's bad. That becomes kind of mob mentality, court of public opinion. That's a problem. That's not due process. That's not transparency. That's not the ability to face thine accuser. That's not innocent until proven guilty. And that's really kind of what I'm trying to educate about. A fully informed jury, critical to take care of that. Anyway, they say this isn't organic. That's Joe Rogan. He says the Minnesota's ICE protests are coordinated to induce chaos. Now, let's be clear, that's his own statements. There's no facts that we know that can back that up or whatever else, except for I do agree they need to follow the money. And I do agree that we need to find out, are these people paid protesters? Where are they coming from? Who's funding them? Who's giving them the, quote, action to get violent? You got this poor kid that got killed in Minnesota. I'm not defending that. But he was violent and destroyed police property, smashed out the brake lights or the rear lights of the vehicle, and all kinds of things. The problem is I got criticism for all sides. Donald Trump saying, well, hey, you just can't bring a gun to these things. Yeah, you can. This is America, Donald. I don't know if you remember that, but there's this thing called the Second Amendment, and my rights won't be infringed. Now, I agree that having a gun in your waistband and advancing on the cops is a bad idea. So I went off yesterday explaining how I think, hey, here's what you don't do, folks. You don't run from the cops. Okay? It's just not a smart move. 9 times out of 10, it's just going to be worse for you. They're going to get ticked off, and they're going to cross the line oftentimes from taking care of, the law versus they're mad now because you hurt them or you ran from them or you frustrated them. And am I defending they should do that? Of course not. But I'm telling you that running from the cops, advancing on the cops, resisting arrest, all these things, if you really believe you're being wronged, there's a day and a place and a time to have your just due and a redress of grievance. It's not time on the streets to rebel against the cops or rebel against the cops. I'm not telling you the cops are always right, and I'm not always defending the cops. All I'm telling you is it won't go well for you. It just won't. And I'm just telling you that it's smarter, even if you feel in fear for your life. Do you think running is going to protect your life? Likely running is going to cause them to take your life or to harm you in some way that probably didn't need to happen. And so, people can criticize me all they want and go, just because you can't see and run away, Sam, that doesn't mean the rest of us can't. I get it. I'm just telling you the wiser course. Forget my sight issue. I've worked with sheriffs for a long time, a real long time, more than 15 years. And I'm telling you that running from the cops, advancing on the cops, arguing with the cops, resisting arrest, all those things are going to make things worse. I'm just telling you. And blindness has nothing to do with that. Education might have something to do with it in the sense that, folks, even if you run away from the cops tomorrow and get away, later, though, they'll note it down. And later, as they build a dossier on who you are, that's probably, sadly, why this gentleman is dead in Minnesota. Because, hey, several days before that, he was literally yelling at the cops, dropping F-bombs, saying how much he hates them, literally assaulting their vehicle. They knew he had a gun. Okay, every one of these things ratchets up concern. And the more you ratchet up concern, the more they're going to say, I want to go home to my wife tonight. So I'm not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You've already proven you have a gun. You've proven that you hate us. You've proven that you're willing to destroy private property. Anyway, I digress, except I'm just telling you, I told people running from the cops was a bad idea yesterday, and now I'm getting all kinds of criticism comments about that. Doctor, you want to respond to that?
You're in a position, Sam, you're going to win friends and you're going to influence people and you're also going to make enemies. I think you got to just take it with a grain of salt. I don't think it means a whole hill of beans of difference.
Well, when we come back, let's see what you think, though. What's your recommendation for these people that are clashing with the cops all over the place? We'll get your thoughts in seconds. Liberty Roundtable live.
There's so many what ifs and could be and how about this kind of scenarios. And everybody can try and peel the banana or skin the cat another different way. But I'm very concerned with the police behavior that I'm seeing in Minnesota, and I'm definitely concerned with the idiots that are venting themselves against activities of trying to fulfill police jobs. I think the police have way come down in terms of their professionalism. You don't empty two handguns into the back of a guy that's on the ground, completely flat out. There's
disarmed and subdued.
Absolutely, and two guys empty their firearms. They don't know how many rounds. At least I haven't been able to ascertain it yet. Somewhere between 9 and 15 rounds in his back, while he's laying on his belly. That is egregious. These people should be professional. They should recognize, there's an element of danger, but you don't escalate that at every turn. I've seen so many police officers brandishing firearms, directly pointing down on individuals with combat shotguns. I mean, people, it's like you've got all the guns, you've got all the badges, you've got all the power. And how you deal with that is important in how you run through whatever your daily job is. And if all you can do is escalate, that's a problem. By the way, this Alex Pretti guy, if this video is actually accurate, that some days before shows him kicking the taillight of a vehicle, it's like, holy cow, that guy's out of control. What an idiot, that kind of stuff. And it looks terrible. But I ask people, does that mean they should have marked it on their little black book?
Absolutely not.
When we get a chance, we're going to put 8, 9, 12, 15 bullets in this guy's back. And so all it takes is just one little misstep. Now, was he charging the police when it happened? No. When this shooting occurred, I've looked at it from every angle, dozens of opportunities to look at it. And he was not brandishing any kind of weapon. He advanced to assist, it appears, a woman or two that had been pushed down by the agents. This is really professional behavior.
Yeah, who pushes women down like that anyway? And I mean, I get it. And I'm not defending
he
the cops
advances
100%.
to do that.
What I'm telling you, though, is I don't think running from the cops is a good plan.
Well, that may be an individual situation, and it's probably right in most cases, okay? But to tell you the truth, if the cops have created an environment that has escalated to the point that they're firing on Americans for crying out loud, like I said, I don't want to take, I would like to see what the system comes up with, but they can't be judge, jury, and hangman on the ground. And that's the problem. And that's what happened here. And like I say, one of the cops disarmed this guy by pulling that handgun out of his holster at the small of his back. And then he yells, gun. So all these guys, well, two guys, they unholster and empty. And the professionalism has just got to come up on this. By the way,
it does. And when Trump and Bondi and everybody else says, hey, you can't have a gun, you can't bring a gun to this, they're wrong. When the government says, hey, take the guns first, due process second, they're wrong. But at the same time, I'm just trying to educate people to say, look, when you're in one of these situations, I'm not saying that it could never make sense to run from the cops. If you're in Russia or you're in Mexico where the federales are or whatever, and it's crazy. And I'm not saying there's never a time when government breaks down where that doesn't make sense. The founding fathers did it. I'm aware of all that. I'm just telling people, hey, when you teach your kids, because you're black or because you're this or that or whatever, hey, run. I'm just telling you, 9 times out of 10, running will not help you. It'll just make things worse. You'll either get violence against you or be dead. Now, is that right? Of course not. But oftentimes, it's reality. And I think that we need Tom Holman to back off there a little bit. I think we need the police to become more professional. But I believe, honestly, if you had a sheriff's office there with a constitutional educated sheriff that understood how to de-escalate these situations, I don't think we would be having the big problems that we have on these front. So one of your topics last night in the webinar, would having local police and sheriffs enforce the law in Minnesota solve the problem? I believe it would not solve the problem, but it would absolutely increase safety, stability, protection. There's a term called community policing where the police know the community, know the people. They know when people are there from out of town. They know, those kinds of things I think could really make a lot of difference. But again, it's all about de-escalation training. And I don't believe police from the top, meaning local, to the bottom, meaning federal, I don't think that they're taught in de-escalation tactics. I don't think they're taught to stand down and to simplify. They're taught, hey, you oppose us, we're the law, and you want to do this the easy way or the hard way. My dad used to say in the old days, do you want your hair cut in the chair or on the floor? It's kind of like that, where it's, and that's the problem that we have. So the mentality of the police need to change for sure, doctor. But I'm just telling these people, when you advance on cops, even with a cell phone in your hand, when you start, dropping F-bombs and just, getting crazy and destroying property and these kind of things, you up your risk of things not going favorably. That doesn't mean that the cops have the right to do these things. It just means, I'm telling you, if the cops won't de-escalate, the best thing you can do 9 times out of 10 is de-escalate, especially in America where we don't have, I'm not saying the cops are perfect, but we don't have just the complete absolute lack of law or lawlessness in the country at this point. And so I'm just giving people general good guidelines to keep people alive at this point. Cooperation and de-escalation, everybody should be thinking that way.
Well, everyone
Doctor?
should be, but those that are in the profession, I mean, you stop and think about it. There's a lot of idiots out on the street. I mean, I don't care.
That's for sure.
You're not running into them in your car, but they're trying to run into you. You get the idea. I think mush for brains has become what society is today, particularly after the COVID jab. But at any rate, no, I de-escalate. But the fact of the matter is, 50 years ago, I had a good friend. He wanted to be a cop so bad that he could taste it. He went to a community in Colorado. It was close by Denver. I don't remember where it was exactly, maybe Lakewood or someplace like that, Littleton. Anyway, and he went through a whole selection process. And they would kind of put you in scenarios that showed how you responded to pressure and everything like that. And my friend failed miserably. He would have gunned down anybody he pulled over, not anybody, but in this particular one he failed on, he would have killed a traffic stop because it didn't go the way he thought it ought to. And they wouldn't take him. They said, you know what? We don't want you in our community. We want a partnership between our community and the peace officers that we're hiring. And there's a whole long story to it and everything like that. He became a cop in another community in another state. But the fact of the matter is, he had a propensity to have kind of a short fuse. And I do this, and he's a great guy anyway. But sometimes, if you have power, perceived power, and you're wearing the right costume, you think you can do anything you want. Look, the police are acting like they're in Fallujah, at the mean streets of Fallujah. They're all in body armor. They got M16s, M4s, combat shotguns, grenade launchers. They've got all sorts of stuff backing them up. Everybody's got a gun on their hip. They're in body armor. It's been militarized. And you say, well, we wouldn't need this if you guys weren't so crappy to us. Well, quit being, let's both sides say, have a little detente here or something like that. And it just gets worse the way it's going.
if you have the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association brought in to train in de-escalation tactics, train in due process tactics, train in probable cause understanding and these kind of things, that would improve things a lot. But the citizens could improve things a lot too. And I guess the only reason I'm bringing this up is, hey, whether, should this guy be advancing on the cops with a camera after he literally assaulted their vehicle? Now I'm not justifying their reaction by any means. I'm just saying, hey, I can't control what the cops do tomorrow, but I can control what I do. And I'm just telling you that I think running from the cops in most cases is not going to be a helpful move.
Well, it's going to probably escalate a lot of different ways. But the point of the matter is people and the police and the president on down need to understand that we are not subjects and serfs. And I'm not saying that the mob is going about this the way that should be done as good Americans. But what I'm saying is, and by the way, to go around the whole horn here, I think that the Trump is seeing this as a trigger point that may lose the midterm elections. He sent Tom Holman in there, and I watched Tom Holman's interview, his press conference. Holy cow! My respect for him went up orders of magnitude. He kind of. Let me tell you, here's been my perception of him, and this maybe is a little unkind because sometimes you judge a book by its cover, but I've always looked at him kind of as a heads down, full speed ahead pugilist that blocks punches with his face. I mean, the guy just...
No, far from.
But I'm telling you, in his diplomacy, holy cow, we can talk about it probably after the break, but I think he's trying to de-escalate.
I completely agree. He's trying to de-escalate, and that's my point, is I want everybody to consider de-escalating. And just because the cops are out of control, that doesn't give us the right just to rage against the machine and ratchet up, giving them excuses. That's all I'm saying. It doesn't justify what they've done. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just telling you, we want to be part of the solution, not the problem. The question then becomes, what do you do to become part of the solution? And I'm saying it starts by not running from the cops. It starts by not vandalizing property. It starts by not assaulting the cops verbally with F-bombs and getting crazy. It starts with going home to your family, for crying out loud. All right, back with you live. Dr. Scott Bradley with me, freedomsrisingsun.com. At the webinar last night, Q&As on the Constitution and more. The question, would having local police and sheriffs enforce the law in Minnesota solve the problem? I don't think it would solve it, but I do think if we had community policing brought back to where the police did know the citizenry, they knew who was from out of town. One of the things I've recommended is get people on rooftops with scopes or with binoculars or whatever. Not violent, not putting the beam of snipers on anybody, but you could watch a crowd and find out who's got communications. You can watch them talk into their, whatever, who's leading who the leaders are. And you can literally have peaceful people go in and tap them on the shoulder and say, sir, we need to talk to you. Come out of the crowd. And if you were to take a lot of the leaders out of the crowd, if you were to peacefully disrupt that, I think that you could go a long way towards defusing these crowds and getting people sent home. There's ways to do that. There's ways to find out who the leadership people, how they're communicating, who's actually doing violence. Most of the protesters are not being violent, but there's enough of them to where it's a problem. And so I'm just saying, hey, I think that local police, local sheriffs are one of the great answers. And I think there's a term called coordination that we need to consider. The general government can take care of illegal aliens in the border. And hey, when you've got these beachheads inside the country and stuff that are a problem, but they need to coordinate with local law enforcement. And the big problem here is you've got the two governments in a civil war. You've got the state of Minnesota not wanting to work with the feds and vice versa. So Tom Holman went in and he announced at the press conference blatantly that federal immigration officials will, I repeat, will continue their enforcement activities in Minnesota. He also confirmed that the operations are focused on arresting criminal aliens, illegal aliens. And yes, this policy will persist under President Trump's directive. The statement followed his discussion with Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the mayor there, Jacob Fry. Ellison specified that Minnesota county jails will start informing ICE of the release dates of detainees that are considered public safety threats or dangerous. Now, I hope he makes good on that promise, because this is one thing that Tom Holman has really highlighted, Dr. Bradley, that, hey, you know what? We could catch these people in the jails. They're already there. The problem is, hey, the local people release them and we don't get a chance. So therefore, we're forced to go into the communities and have these confrontations. If you'd help us and partner and coordinate with us, we wouldn't have these things in the first place. DHS Secretary Christie Noem, in my opinion, went out of control. She faces impeachment threats right now after claiming that Pretti was a domestic terrorist, a statement, I guess they say, influenced by White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. So there you go. You're right that we have problems on all sides of this. But to me, community policing, local law enforcement, partnering, coordination with, working, with the jails so that, hey, we don't have to release these people into society and then go after them with innocent people around them and everything else. There's ways to go about this. We're just not, in my mind, working through proper procedures. Doctor?
Well, all the things you point out, I think, have the very great potential of being able to de-escalate and press forward properly. But the first thing that had to happen was some dialogue. And I think Holman brought that to it. And you just can't use a sledgehammer on a upholstery tack and have it turn out good. And honestly, I think Christie Noem and I think the other guy, Bovio, or so whatever his name is, Gregory, that was previously the ICE guy, I think they had their instructions from the very top of the food chain. I think this came right out of the White House. And I think
that would be really important in discovery and transparency to know that. Was he acting on his own and just too aggressive and we need to rein that guy in or dismiss that guy? Or was this really from the top with what kind of orders? Right? We need to know those things.
And I've seen so many instances lately that I could elucidate where I think Trump has misunderstood the boots on the ground realities. And sometimes there's personal loyalty. Somebody needs to say, Mr. President, can I give you a little bit of advice? Or here's what I think is happening here, whatever. And he's got to be willing to hear these people that are professionals in their field. And I think the only thing that's being heard right now is just use a sledgehammer to put a thumbtack in. But I think your concepts about, community policing and this, remember the old movie, I think James Garner was in it, Support Your Local Sheriff. And then there's the John Birch Society about their program about keeping your local police independent. And I think there's so much to that, because if you don't have that, you have a federalized police force. And that is not constitutional. A huge problem. And that's the problem that we're dealing with right now, is there's an escalation of federalization. Even if you say, I got a little police department in my community, well, they're bought off by feds oftentimes. There are grants that they're getting for armor, for vehicles, for weapons, for training.
Militarized for sure, and that's a serious no-no and a serious problem. So I don't want people to think that I'm just defending the cops no matter what they do. That's completely false. I think George Washington's advice, his counsel to seek truth and pursue it steadily, is a real important issue here. What is the truth? And the answer when I speak about this is this transparency I'm talking about, this probable cause documentation, this due process documentation, this face thine accuser idea, this fully informed jury idea. All these things are the solutions, right?
All of these things have been incorporated in the American jurisprudence system, and all of the checks and balances are there for a reason. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. All men would be tyrants if they could. These are all aphorisms that came down. The founding fathers were well aware of that natural disposition. And so the whole idea of the constitutions is to delegate the authority necessary to perform the things that are appropriate and withhold all others. And what's happening now is absolutely an accrual of power to the point that tyranny could come out of it. And so, like I say, I think that this idea of opening a dialogue, and it's not just a dialogue between Holman and the mayor. I mean, these kinds of things, local police people, which in my opinion have been really subverted in recent decades, by the way, we're
They
having the
have, for
federalization
sure.
of the police.
However, many of them were there, and then when ICE showed up, many of the police bailed.
But that's
And I
the
find that to be
advice.
a I find that to be a big problem too, though. They shouldn't do that.
Well, here's the deal: that their senior leadership were the ones that counseled them to do that. Pull back, pull
I know.
back.
I understand.
And so this thing, there's a lot more to this story. And like I say, there's I've never seen a tortilla so flat there weren't two sides. And I think what needs to happen is, for, for crying out loud, we're Americans. They're not in Fallujah. They're not kicking doors in and throwing grenades in before they walk in the room. This is not the way our country was designed to be. And somebody's got to be an adult in the room to start to talk this thing through. You know, I like I say, I'm kind of a junkie on this stuff, in the fact that I try and review all options, all angles, I try, as George Washington said, one straight course, seek truth, pursue it steadily. And that's what I seek to do. But I am utterly shocked at how many people can see the same videos, can hear the same talk, can watch the same interaction and
Oh yeah,
interplay
they
that
come to
happens.
totally different conclusions. 100%.
Absolutely. I worked for a guy one time. I mean, it was a wonderful person in terms of his personality, but we'd go into meetings and without going into extended discussions, the answer would be no. You're not going to do this. You can't do this. We will not support this, and stated in the strongest terms. And he'd walk out with me and he'd say, "We got the go ahead. Let's go." I say, "Were we in the same room?" And I'm just astonished at how people can be in the same room and hear so many things differently.
You're right about that. The biggest reason that I focus on the individual is because we don't have control what other people do. We just have control of what we do. And if government really is our employee, and we're the employer, if that's really true, if they work for us, then we're the boss. And if we're the boss, then we need to hold the moral high ground. And that's why I say that, running from the cops isn't a wise idea. Now, if you have complete government breakdown, it's a different story. And in many cases, the government's too harsh. I get it. And the government's overstepping their authority. You give an inch, they'll take a mile. That's all true. But if they work for me, then the reality is that I need to hold the upper hand and do so by demonstrating the behavior that I want them to adopt. And the more we do that, the better off we'll be. Dialogue's vital. Community policing's vital. Local police force is vital. Coordinating with the national in the limited scope that they have is critical. But now Donald Trump is I was hoping he was going to abolish the Federal Reserve for my Christmas present, but it didn't happen. But now he's going to replace the Jerome Powell with Kevin Warsh to lead the Federal Reserve. When we come back, Dr. Bradley will talk about that for a second, too. And then we'll jump into the Trump family sues the government. We'll tell you how, why, and what in seconds. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live. What about this new guy on the Federal Reserve Board? What's his name? Kevin? And he used to be on the Federal Reserve Board before and all this kind of stuff. And to me, it's a clown show. I need Donald to abolish the Federal Reserve, Doctor.
Yeah, as usually the case, Sam. You open up a can of worms before a break, and then we go, "Oh my goodness, we don't have time to talk." Yeah, we don't have time to talk, but this Kevin Warsh guy, yeah, he's been a board of governors for the Fed, and you can go through all of his history and background and his Hoover Institute, Bravo Sierra. That's some of these associations they have, exactly where they're aligned based upon their who birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. But I think the bottom line on this, and as brief as possible, the Federal Reserve is an unconstitutional Marxist philosophy. We have a private banking consortium that runs the American economy, and they're going to be some sort of Fabian socialist that's going to be at the head of that, because that is the basis of their Keynesian economics. And there's a guy from Utah that was very much involved in this. His name was Mariner Eccles, and he was very much, board of governors and chair and all that kind of stuff. And he was a Fabian socialist before Keynes was. I mean, and he was a Keynesian economics guy. And that's just what the Federal Reserve is. It controls your economy. It under the Federal Reserve since 1913, we have lost over 97% of our purchasing power of the dollar because of the profligate printing of money, valueless money, paper money. Founders warned against this in August of 1787 when they were in convention. They debated, discussed, and voted multiple times on no unbacked paper money. In fact, the comment was made, and it's recorded in Madison's notes on the convention. If we allowed that, it would be as dangerous as the mark of the beast spoken of in the book of Revelation. All of that stuff is proved prophetic, if you will. They're looking forward. And so Trump has this new guy who was appointed by George W. Bush to the governorship, I believe, initially. He's been around a while, but it's the same old, same old. You get a different face in there, and they run it according to the banking consortium's desires. And oh yeah, they have independence. No, they don't. Well, they're independent from any control, it seems like. They want to run it for the benefit of their constituents, who are the private owners of the Fed. So yeah, you're going to get more of the same old, and Trump can celebrate and commemorate and build the story. It's going to be the same thing that's happened since 1913, only on steroids. I mean,
yeah, he can pretend we have a friendlier Federal Reserve, but the fly is in the ointment, Doctor.
It's just in the design of the system. I always recommend that people read G. Edward Griffin's magnificent page-turner book. You think, oh, it's about economics. It's dry and lifeless and everything. But the book's name is The Creature from Jekyll Island. It talks about the origins of the Federal Reserve. And it just really is, you know what? You can put a silk glove on an iron fist, and it's still iron, and it's going to pound you. And so Trump has got a particular, what he's looking for is loose money. He wants to have interest rates drop, and the problem
I want to have? I don't want loose money. I want honest money, Doctor.
Well, that's the thing, and yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I don't know, have you've been watching silver and gold, and it has just skyrocketed in just recent times, and
well, it's only above $5,000 for gold when it used to be worth $20, and it's only above $100 when it used to be $1. Other than that, Doctor.
Well, other than that, what could go wrong? I mean, the fact of the matter is that what happens when what this is a symptom of, that people are fleeing to a sound, safe supply that they can put their wealth in. If you put it in dollars, it's going to go down and down and down, and so right now, to me, it's a little terrifying, and I've been predicting this movement for decades, literally. And now that it really seems to be underway, you start thinking, well, how far is it going to fall? Because silver's been silver forever. Gold's been gold forever. It only does what it does, and it is only what it is. And it's not getting greater value. It's that the dollar is plummeting. And if the dollar's...
That's right.
It's $5,000, over $5,000 right now for gold per ounce, and it's over $100 for silver per ounce. Okay, and we're just talking in round numbers. Because it's so volatile, you can hardly keep up with it. So people are fleeing to that, and it's not just people; it's institutions, it's nations.
Oh yeah.
And when the dollar really reaches its full value, you're going to see what they've done to it over the last 112 years. And the Federal Reserve, with a profligate Congress and president, because what they say is they can go to the bank that never says no. We can get more, guys. Hey, just print some more up. And pretty soon we have so many dollars out there chasing the same amount of gold and silver that the gold and silver is asking for more dollars to come about. I mean, it's simple, but the Federal Reserve is governed by a Fabian socialist, Keynesian kind of world that's been around actually before FDR, but FDR really fully implemented it. So I'm telling you, Trump naming somebody.
It won't make a hill of beans of difference to have this new guy there. Yes, he might lower interest rates for a while, but then later down the road, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul, folks. There's eternal principles here, and honest money dishonestly replaced. No matter how you slice that, no matter how you skin that cat, it's still dishonest money. It's still a debt-based fiat system that will, historically proven shows, will go south. Now, they might have levers to manipulate it temporarily to make you feel like it's okay and everything else, but at the end of the day, it isn't going to end well. It never does, Doctor.
No, you can go historically. The founding fathers, they were great historians. They were great observers of history, and they found that this fiat-based currency always fails. And like I say, they said it was as dangerous as the mark of the beast. And so we have been playing in this arena for 100 and plus a dozen years, and I watch what silver and gold are doing, and it's at all-time highs in every single category, and the dollar is really reaching
People
down.
People are scared. People are panicking, right?
I think so, and the problem is that in my book I've got a chapter on economics and freedom. They're very inextricably woven together. They really, truly, if you don't have economic freedom, you're not truly free. A power over a man's subsistence. In fact, Hamilton said this twice in the Federalist Papers, is a power over the man. And tyrants throughout history have realized if people are in charge of their own economics with a predictable, safe, and a good government kind of basis, which the founding fathers started.
Environment.
Yeah. It's a predictable environment that you can go forward. You can invest in businesses. You can get married. You can buy a farm. You can, whatever you're gonna pursue. It's if you know that there's not somebody going to rip the rug out from underneath you, whether it's domestic violence or foreign invasion or a bad economy. They're all essential to be in the right side of the ledger, or trouble ensues. And that's what the General Welfare Clause is about, that predictable, stable environment in which people can go out and become everything that they need to be or want to be. And so, yeah, I think Trump thinks he's cut a fat hog, and he's going to have, his way with this guy. He's only got about 3 more years left in office. And so during that period of time, if he can manipulate this guy to loose money, but sooner or later the chickens are going to come home to roost. You look what happened in 2008. Those subprime loans that were out there. Oh, give them the money, for crying out loud. Who cares if they can pay it back? Too big to fail. All of those things come back and haunt us.
And we did the same thing in 2008. We did the same thing in COVID, really. And now
Absolutely.
President Trump's trying to say, Sam, do you want a $2,000 stipend from all the tariffs we've been able to gather? And my response is, no, I just want you to abolish the IRS. That was my second hope for a Christmas gift. But now Donald Trump family sues the IRS, seeking $10 billion because of the leaked tax returns on Trump first go-round. Scott McClellan over at townhall.com has the deets on this one. But all I can tell you is Trump literally wants to sue the federal government because the IRS leaked his tax return. Now, I'd like to sue the IRS too. They've abused every one of us. Why doesn't Trump abolish the IRS? We've got the ERS now, ERS or whatever, the External Revenue Service. And so we don't need the internal one anymore. Donald, you don't need to just sue them, just abolish them. Okay? That would help us all, not just you, I might add. All right. Hang tight, folks. We got a whole lot more to come. Hard-hitting news that I refuse to use with Dr. Scott Bradley. Check out his award-winning website, freedomsrisingsun.com. Join the webinars, Q&As on the Constitution. Check out his collegiate series, To Preserve the Nation. I'm Sam Bushman. We're syndicated by the Loving Liberty Networks, lovingliberty.net. God save the Republic of the United States of America.